Okay, so for our three change makers for this change makers panel, our first is Dr. Nancy Tuckman, and she is the founding dean of the School of Environmental Sustainability at Loyola University, Chicago. Nancy is an aquatic ecologist studying human impacts on Great Lakes coastal wetlands with her ecological restoration team. In 2002 to 2003, she served as program officer at the National Science Foundation's Ecosystem Studies program and was president of the International Society of Freshwater Science in 2009 to 2010. Tuckman's career at Loyola Chicago began in the bio department, where she holds the rank of professor. She served as associate provost for research from 2004 to 2008 and developed the university's Office of Sustainability. From 2010 to 2013, she served as vice provost, where she designed the Institute of Environmental Sustainability with its new $58 million building. And in 2013, the university president appointed her the institute's founding dean. In 2020, the IES transitioned to school status and has 460 students, 6 majors, 3 minors, and 2 master's programs. Building sustainability at Loyola earned Tuckman the Chicago Magazine Green Award in 2013 and Chicago Eco Champion in 2018. And a little bit more about Loyola. In 2013, it was ranked the 4th greenest college in the nation. And in 2015, the university ratified a climate action plan to reach carbon neutrality by 2025. In 2018, Loyola was awarded the National Climate Leadership Award. Tuckman's work is greatly inspired by the Jesuit mission of social justice. She chairs the International Association of Jesuit Universities Task Force on Environmental and Economic Justice. She and Dr. Michael Schuck co-direct a free online environmental science textbook entitled Healing Earth, which received the inaugural Expanded Reason Award from Pope Francis and the Vatican in 2017. So welcome to Dr. Tuckman. Our second panelist is Dr. Eben Goodstein, who's the director of the Bard Center for Environmental Policy and convener of the Worldwide Teach-In. Eben Goodstein, in recent years, has coordinated a series of national educational initiatives on climate change involving over 2,500 colleges, universities, high schools, and community organizations. He's the author of a college textbook, Economics in the Environment, which is now in its 9th edition, Fighting for Love in the Century of Extinction, How Passion and Politics Can Stop Global Warming, and The Trade-Off Myth, Fact and Fiction About Jobs in the Environment. Articles by Dr. Goodstein have appeared in the Journal of Environmental Economics and Management, Land Economics, Ecological Economics, and Environmental Management, among other outlets. His research has been featured in the New York Times, Scientific American, Time, Chemical and Engineering News, The Economist, USA Today, and the Chronicle of Higher Education. He serves on the editorial board of Sustainability, the Journal of Record, and was a member of the board of directors of the Follett Corporation. Welcome, Eben. And third, last but not least, is Suzanne Selensky from the Climate Reality Project. Suzanne is an educator, writer, and administrator with a long-standing commitment to mission-driven institutions. Her training in 2020 as a climate reality leader has inspired her to pursue climate activism on a larger scale. Currently, the executive director of Literacy Volunteers of Southern Connecticut, she has also been a consultant to nonprofits, a writer, researcher, and editor specializing in science and health, and an administrator and academic advisor in higher education. As an adjunct faculty member, she's taught at several universities, including in Fairfield University's honors program. In addition to the Climate Reality Project, she is active in Yale Women and First Gen Yale, a group supporting and advocating for first-generation low-income students and alumni. She holds degrees from Yale University and Wesleyan University. So welcome, Suzanne, and welcome to all 3 of our panelists. So that's enough from me. I'm going to turn over to these fantastic change makers who are going to share a little bit about their work. So Nancy, we're going to start with you, if that's all right.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you, Isabel, for that.
Myself, and you go ahead.
Okay, Thank you for that super long introduction. I should have trimmed it had I known you were going to say all that, but I really appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here. This is a really neat and I think very important event that the students put on. It's exciting that it is coming out of the Jesuit University context. So I just want to thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And I'm also excited to be working with Eben, and Suzanne on this as well. So let me just share with you some slides and I'll start here. I was asked to put a little bit of context about the grand challenge itself of environmental degradation, climate change, overpopulation, poverty, and land and ocean exploitation. So I'm just going to do this kind of briefly because I think people are highly aware of the urgency and the ultimacy of this problem. But what I'd like to do is take a little bit of a spin on it in terms of looking at what the American Jesuit and Colleges organization is doing, and even the International Association of Jesuit Universities, of which there are 211 members. So what are the Jesuit universities doing, and sort of how is Pope Francis giving us a bit of a way forward on this? So again, just sort of let's see if I can advance this. Okay, I am coming at this from a scientist, but I am keenly aware that the issue of climate change and environmental degradation is really a humanitarian justice issue. It's a justice issue, it's a social issue more than it is an environmental one, because humans are the drivers of the degradation of our own environment. But it does have disproportionately high impacts on the poor, people who are living at the margins of the world, those who are most vulnerable and underrepresented, and that includes youth and future generations. It also includes all organisms, all forms of life that are non-human. Forbes did, I think, a very important survey of youth from Generation Z. It's people who are 25 years older or younger, and asked them, what are the most important issues that are facing the world and facing your country? So for Generation Z, the top Generation Z issue is climate change. That's high on their mind. It's the most pressing and urgent issue for this particular generation. The second most important issue is pollution. The third is terrorism. And the fourth is loss of natural resources. So if you look at what are the concerns of the generations of students that are coming into our universities right now, the top four, three of them are environmental issues. So it's very important that in universities, we're really attending to this, not only raising awareness, but calling to action, giving these youth solutions, and also leading by example so they don't feel like it's up to them to solve this issue. There's not enough time for these young people to get to the point in their own lives and careers where they can really strongly affect change. It's really on us, the older generations, to lead by example. And I think universities are great places for doing that. Another one of the main drivers of climate change, I just mentioned that humans are the drivers, but within our systems, it's really our capitalism that's the main driver of climate change and environmental destruction. And this is because our economic model is based on infinite growth. We want infinite growth. We want our GDP to constantly be rising, and yet at the same time, we're expecting that to happen on a finite planet where our natural resources are not infinite, but they're very, very much finite. If we look at this kind of in a cartoon, you'll see our particular form of capitalism is always pushing that red arrow to increase over time. We want the GDP to rise. That means that we're extracting natural resources from the earth, we're producing them, making some sort of a product from them in a factory typically, which oftentimes puts out a lot of pollution, both in air emissions and in water effluents. We then sell the products that come out of these factories We distribute them in big box stores. People buy them, use them, and then dispose of whatever's left. And oftentimes the disposal also produces toxins both in air and in effluents. But the faster we can move this, the higher our GDP rises. And that's why we're always told to go out and shop when our economy seems to be in a slump. But clearly what's happened over time is that the toxins and the trash is piling up on our planet, and the natural resources are becoming depleted. So we're very much out of balance. It's a completely unsustainable model, and yet we just keep pushing it faster and harder. So what we really need to do is bend that and make more of a circular economy, because with the number of people that we have on the planet right now, if everyone were to live at a level that's about average of the people in the United States in terms of what we consume to maintain our lifestyles, it would require 6 Earths in order to hold all of our waste and provide all of the natural resources that we need for extraction. So clearly it's just way unsustainable. We're way beyond the tipping point, and we again need to bend that economy, that economic model, make it more of a circular economy, get away from the linear make waste, and make it a more circular system. It's a little bit easier said than done, but we can do it on different scales. This can be done in an organization, like on a university campus or in a business, but it can also be done at the level of a federal government or the EU, for example, which is working on making their economy circular. Well, I would say that as Jesuit universities, we sort of have an advantage because we've got the Pope, who's a Jesuit, and we've got the Society of Jesus that has put together these 4 universal apostolic preferences. And I see these 2 big worldwide leaders as being really helpful for us Jesuit universities. They give us a compass, they give us some really aspirational goals to work towards. And so I feel as though the work that we're doing collectively around caring for our common home is really inspired by advancing what the Pope is asking us to do and advancing the UAPs, if you will. So just to be a little bit more specific on the ground, what we're doing in Jesuit universities is responding to global environmental crisis with a 2-pronged approach. And this is kind of what all universities, not just Jesuit universities, but all universities that are working on this issue are really walking the walk by reducing their own campus environmental footprint through energy saving, waste reduction, reduction of consumption, landscaping, working with water and water capture, water reuse, all of the kind of buckets of sustainability, if you will. People are doing this on their campuses to reduce their campus footprint. And then, of course, the wheelhouse of our organizations in higher ed is education. And so the more that we can integrate this knowledge, but also a call to action through our curricula, the better we're doing in advancing the Pope's encyclical and also those UAPs. So just to sort of wrap up, I want to inspire you in the call to action that the Pope has put for all good people on the planet. He's asking us all to join the Laudato Si 7-year journey. And I know that Julie, who's organized this conference, has been able to get Father Jostrom Isaac Curithodam, who's the dicastery for promoting integral human development, coming right out of the Vatican, to speak tomorrow morning to all the students and all of us that are participating. So Father Josh, as he is affectionately known, is really the person in the Vatican who's leading the entire moving Laudato Si into action through this thing called the 7-year journey. And universities are being called in a special way that makes sense for the work that universities do. And so the Jesuits, through the International Association of Jesuit Universities, and Michael Shook, who's leading the working group there for the Laudato Si Universities working group, has put together a big committee of over 100 members that are representing all these different continents in the United States, or sorry, in the world. And what you'll see is on November 14th, the dicastery is going to launch the Laudato Si plan for each sector. So kind of keep an eye out for what comes out for universities. And that's really a pathway for universities to jump into taking action to advance Laudato Si. So I would just say through, universities, we can incorporate environmental sustainability into our missions, into our university missions, into our strategic plans, and certainly into our curriculum and our campus operations. But the higher we can get this to go, and so that it's something that's very central to what the president and the cabinet are talking about, the more we'll be able to advance our universities towards climate neutrality. This is kind of a pretty image of the Laudato Si goals, and it's very much of a takeoff of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You'll probably recognize that, but the Laudato Si goals, there are 7 of them, and they really do pretty much incorporate the 17 SDGs as well. So become a Laudato Si university, whether you're a Catholic university or not, or a Jesuit university or not. There's lots of ways to get into this platform and look at inspiring ways to get our students and faculty and administrators to advance this mission. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and now hand it off. I think Eben is the next speaker.
Yes, thank you, Nancy, for that great overview. And I will share my screen and then dive into a somewhat different conversation, related obviously. I'm going to be speaking specifically about the curricular piece, if you will, right? How do we engage hundreds of students on our campuses in dialogue about climate solutions, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them worldwide. And again, for this audience, I don't need to explain why. Climate impacts are accelerating. It's been a nightmare of a summer for many people around the world. Here in the United States, our western forests are essentially burning down. Year after year, massive forest fires. Those dense conifer forests, they're being transformed in the face of climate change. We had one of the worst hurricanes to hit the US ever in Louisiana. Massive flooding, throughout the East, from Tennessee to New York, and of course, record-shattering temperatures in the Northwest. And this is happening all over the world. So it's a scary time in some ways, but it's also a time of tremendous agency. And that really is the message of the worldwide teach-in, that over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we have the ability to dramatically change the direction that we're headed in, and create a much more just and sustainable and prosperous future for our kids and grandkids. And so for many ways, it's never been a more exciting time to be alive as a human being, because no generations before yours and ours have really had the ability to so dramatically change the future through the decisions that we make. And that's really the message that we want to communicate through this initiative, that at this point in time, this is no time for despair. This is a time for realistic optimism about our ability to rewire the world with clean energy over the next 10 years and fundamentally stabilize the climate, even though we know we've already set in motion a lot of challenging issues that we're going to have to address. So this is work that comes out of a project at Bard College, where I'm the graduate director for sustainability, called Solve Climate by 2030. And we've been at this for a couple of years in partnership with global universities, including Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, Central European University, with support from the Open Society University Network. And over the last couple of years, we've been really trying to push this idea that we're stronger together, that if we engage in collaborative climate education, working across universities, we're going to get way more people talking about climate change and their role in solving these issues. And over COVID times, these were webinars. So we've involved more than 175 universities and colleges in 40 nations and almost every US state in producing webinars with local climate experts, indigenous voices, youth activists, talking about what a green recovery looks like. What do we really need to do in Utah and Florida and Malaysia and Mexico to really move the needle on climate change? Here are the flags from our April 2021 event. We have a global library of solutions in many different languages where we recorded these webinars. So if you want to find out what climate justice and progress looks like in South Africa or Rwanda or Singapore or Ecuador or Serbia or the Netherlands or Malaysia or Mexico, if you speak the language, you can dip in to this work. So what we want to do now is really scale this work, because we all have to be thinking about scaling solutions, as the Pope suggests, right? We need every college and university on board with this vision. And so we really are putting this out there as a chance for college and universities, high schools, faith communities to engage in a single day in dialogue about solutions. And so our goal this year is 1,000 colleges, universities, high schools, K-8 schools involved in this initiative, 500,000 participants. And what would this mean to hold a teach-in? Well, teach-ins, you know, I'll tell you a story. I was actually present at the first Earth Day teach-in in 1970. I was 10 years old at the time. And I remember, so this is our 5th grade. Somehow we participated in this teaching. It involved 20 million people, as I said, in America. And I remember what they asked me to do, which was they asked us to make posters about the Earth. And I remember that I made a poster that had a factory with, you know, smokestacks, and there was smoke coming out of the factories, and they formed these skull and crossbones, right? And that was what I did for Earth Day. That was my participation in the teach-in. And, you know, here I am 50 years later, and I'm organizing another teach-in. So there's got to be a connection there, right? So somehow that sunk into me that was an important work that needed to be done. And really that is the purpose of the teach-in, right? It's to really inspire students, engage students with the project, right? That there is a lot of things that they can do to help solve this as students, as voters, as political actors, but also through their careers. And last year in France, in Lyon, at one of our events, we had a student come up to a teacher afterwards and said, you know, I'm an engineering student and I was going to go, about to graduate, I was going to work for the oil industry. I can't do that anymore. I really want to put my skills to work solving this problem. And we need artists, we need engineers, we need business people, we need musicians, we need scientists. We need anthropologists. We need lots of people putting their skills to work, because there are so many angles at which you can approach this. So what does this mean? Well, the simplest way to have a teach-in would be to show some sort of a video or have a speaker, but we really want to move beyond that model, because that typically only attracts 20 or 30 students. You know, speakers are, you know, it's really just the people that already care. So how do we move beyond that group? And we've been at this for a while, and we've discovered that the real effective way to build a climate teach-in that involves hundreds of students across your campus, the key to success is really faculty engagement and faculty sort of intellectual leadership. So I'm going to tell you about a model that involves getting 30 plus faculty members to show up at your teach-in event and really lead students in a discussion about solutions. That may sound really hard, but actually it's very easy to do as well. So we've done this many times, most recently at Bard just before the shutdown. And the basic structure is a series of concurrent panels. So in the first hour, you have 4 different panels. And so you have a panel on climate and justice. You have student moderate all these panels, so lots of student involvement. You have an economist talking about the Green New Deal, politics faculty talking about climate and global inequality, sociologists talking about investing in communities. You've got a session on winning the story war. So this is communication. You've got a film faculty member, comm faculty, philosophy and religious studies. A session on climate solutions, global perspectives. Here you can invite your language faculty. So you get your Chinese professor and your Spanish professor, your French professor. And they can talk about what global warming looks like in the newspapers, you know, in the countries of their languages. Next hour, it's very similar structure. You've got a session on dealing with climate depression. Here you have an artist, fine artist. You've got a psychologist, a literature professor talking about climate fiction, cities and climate, heat waves, so history professors, anthropologists, architecture folks. So the point here is that these are not climate experts. You don't have to have 36 climate experts on your campus. You've just got to have climate concerned faculty, and there are many, many of them, right? It's not hard to find 30 climate concerned faculty on any campus. And they just have to talk for 5 minutes on a topic you're going to give them from their disciplinary perspective. You got 4 speakers in every hour, that's only 20 minutes. That leaves 30 minutes for students to get excited about these issues, engage, dig in, and once again, leave with a sense of possibility, a sense that this is important, a sense that this is something I want to be working on. The final hour has got to focus on solutions. One strategy is a plenary session where you invite your president, right, and sort of give them a little bit of a push to be involved in, in this project if they're not already, or your CFO, deans, student activists, and really focus on what can we do as an institution to move the needle. So that is the structure, and the exact details, not important. You can mix and match these different sessions to fit your interest. But the point is, in 3 hours, we had 30 plus faculty and staff presenting. We get 8 students moderating or presenting. And if you've got those 30 faculty, they will inspire or require, 300 students to come. It's kind of guaranteed, all right? And you can see it's a very robust and interesting conversation among anthropologists and artists and philosophers and sociologists and scientists. So it really is a very engaging evening. And then that faculty community is also going to be hungry for more because they've had an interesting time and they've had an empowering time. All right. So now this may look hard, and I promised you it was easy. And it is easy. And I really want to emphasize that this does not take long to organize. You really just need a team of 3 or 4 people, faculty, staff, students. We have all these sample panels on our website. Pick 8, modify if desired. That'll take you an hour, maybe. Brainstorm who to ask. And among your 3 or 4 people, you're probably going to know 20 of them, if not 30 of them. Maybe it's Karen Suarez in chemistry, or Bill Jones in biology. And just reach out to them. They'll say yes. They care about climate change. They only have to talk for 5 minutes. There's not much prep. They will show up. Then reserve your rooms. We've got sample posters, sample programs, plug in the speaker names, and you're done. Right? This is an event that is really easy to put together that will get you your 300 folks there. So you can show a webinar, you can show a movie, you can, do whatever you want. Anything is good, but we want you to really embrace this idea of a one-night climate teach-in if you're at a college or university. But we got lots of other ideas. And if you go to our website, which is just worldwideteachin.org, you'll see that we've got ideas for universities, for high schools. We're working with the Center for Earth Ethics at Columbia University, so we're going to have one that's designed for faith communities if they want to hold their own teach-ins. So lots of possibilities, but do something, and do something that gets beyond the 30 usual suspects. That's really the main point. So what do we need from you? We do information sessions the first Wednesday of every month. And we need you to go grab people by the virtual or physical lapels, by the collar, and say, look, you care about climate change. One thing you have to do this fall is you have to attend one of these information sessions. You can't just sit here and talk about how bad it is. This is something you can do. Attend one of these information sessions and learn about how you can get your school involved. And, we've been sending out lots of emails and people ignore those. They're easy to ignore, but they can't ignore individual requests from their friends and colleagues. So get folks to show up first Wednesday of every month. You can register on our website. So that really is the most important thing you can do to help us this fall, because and of course we want you to organize these events, but you don't really have to start on that much until January. There really isn't that much work to do, and you can start it, January 10th, and you'll be in great shape. But this fall, we need you to ask all these folks. We also need you to sign up your school as soon as you can. So if you click on our website on that sign up to hold a teach-in today, it'll take you to a page that looks like this. We've got way more bubbles, and I can show you in a minute what the live version looks like. But if you were to click on Bangladesh over there in the right, something will pop up. It'll say BRAC University in Bangladesh and Dhaka is planning to an event for the worldwide teach-in on climate and justice. There's a contact space there, but that's it. They don't know what they're doing yet in BRAC, but they went ahead and put a flag on the map. And we need you to do that because this is the psychological device that's going to get us 1,000 schools, right? Folks could say, oh, Loyola's doing it. Well, maybe Northwestern better do it, and the University of Chicago better do it, right? So that kind of leadership on your part is going to drive widespread engagement by other universities. High schools are going to see it. They're going to want to get involved. You can invite high school students to come to your teach-in, get your admissions officers on your team. They'll be excited to do this because, bringing high school kids up to participate in your teach-in is great for them. Lots of ideas, but you got to sign up. So that's it. This is the worldwide teach-in on climate and justice. We have our websites up in Spanish. It's going to be there in Arabic and Russian and French and Indonesian and Korean. And it is global, but it will only happen with your help. I mean, that was the lesson of the first Earth Day. It was a grassroots event where people all over the world, they didn't have emails, they didn't have cell phones, they had to write letters and do mimeographs, and it worked, right? Because people worked at it, and that's what we need you to do for us. So we need to focus the world in order to solve climate, and we can do that. So thank you very much, and look forward to the conversation.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Suzanne Selensky, and unlike the other two panelists, I am not affiliated with a college or university except through my adjunct teaching. And I'm not in charge of any big program or anything like that, but I consider myself a climate change maker nonetheless. And for my portion of the panel, I'm going to tell you why I'm claiming that label and how I think you can as well. And some of the tips I'm going to give you are going to resonate with some of the things that have already been said and probably with the panelists who will follow on. So first, before the tips, I'm going to give you a story. I'm going to tell you a little bit about when I was young, and I would go as a child, I would go with my mother grocery shopping, and my mother would often refuse a paper bag. She would say, no. So she could have been in this photo, this era, but she would not be the woman on the left with getting the paper bag. She'd say, no, thank you, let's save a tree. Now, she did not consider herself an environmentalist, but she grew up during the Great Depression and World War II in the 1930s and 1940s. So economizing, scarcity, rationing, they were all a part of life. You had to do more with less. So that's where she was coming from. And whatever prompted it, her save a tree mantra has stayed with me, as you can tell. And I have long used reusable bags to cart home my groceries, and I've said, no, thank you. I don't need a bag either. I've got my own. Her habit also encouraged me to think how my individual actions were connected to the larger world. So that was a lesson I got when I was really, really young. And for a long time, that's how I approached climate change or global warming or promoting sustainability. I did it with individual awareness, and I did it with individual actions. And once I got married, household actions. So these are things my husband and I did: buying hybrid cars, buying energy efficient appliances, buying products made out of recycled materials, even if they cost more, buying less, not getting on that consumption curve that Nancy talked about, buying less and keeping things going for longer. But while my husband and I, over more than 2 decades, were doing our best to sort of trim the edges of our environmental footprint, the climate crisis was worsening. And it became clear to me that our small scale actions, however important, were not enough. I had to go big and do more. And the pandemic actually gave me that opportunity with having to be at home so much last year. So in July of 2020, I did virtual training and became a climate reality leader. The Climate Reality Project is a nonprofit founded by former Vice President Al Gore. And the training I received over 9 days touched on all aspects of climate change. Yes, the extreme weather events and rising global temperatures, things I knew about, but also things I was much less familiar with, like soil health and regenerative agriculture, like sea level and coastal changes in low-income communities, like human migration patterns, and the spread of vector-borne diseases or such as diseases from mosquitoes outside the tropics. So after these 9 days of intensive training, I was not only more educated, I was empowered to act, I was ready to act, and to act publicly. So in the past 14 months, I've logged more than 25 acts of leadership, including doing presentations, holding meetings with and strategy sessions with other climate reality leaders, contacting my elected representatives, helping connect a student environmental group at Fairfield University, where, as you know, I'm an adjunct faculty member. The group's called LEAF, connecting them with a town group for regular coastal cleanups. So I think, as you can tell, I'm not trying to boast here. I'm saying that these are things that, these are ways in which my work on climate change is important to me. But I also want to emphasize it's not my full-time job. I have been, as my bio said, I've been a teacher, a faculty member. I've been a consultant. Just this month, just this past month, because we're in October, beginning of September, I started a new job in a nonprofit. I also have family responsibilities. And I'm also, like the rest of you, trying to just survive the pandemic. So I'm no superwoman, but if I can make time for climate activism, you can too. So what I'm going to do is give you 7 tips for acting with the urgency that climate change requires, the urgency you've heard about from Nancy, that it requires while still being a student, a faculty member, a son, a daughter, a friend, a person, someone with a life. So I'm going to give you these 7 tips. And again, some of these you're going to hear more about this, how other people have applied things like this. My first thing is find your focus. The climate change, the climate crisis can seem so huge, so overwhelming, so multifaceted that you don't know what to do. You can see, like, what can I do? So reframe that. If there are so many angles to it, so many facets, as Eben said, there are so many ways in which you can take action. So find what is your focus. For me, it was plastics. I have a thing about plastic water bottles, and I know a lot of you probably do too, but I can claim to have had that, to be bothered by them for maybe a lot longer than you have. So I have long had reusable water bottles. I fill them with tap water. I take them around. That was my focus, my way in. And I've since expanded to try to eliminate as many single-use plastics as I can from my life. For you, it might not be plastics, but what's important is that you find your focus. Tip number 7, commit to one action that you can take on a regular basis and make it a habit. So my new habit that I'm trying to cultivate in keeping with my focus on plastics is swapping plastic dental floss for silk or bamboo dental floss. Now, again, sounds like a small step, but it's something I do every day. So it will add up. So that's so much for individual actions. My tip number 7 is realize the power of social norms. Those are the expectations and beliefs that influence behavior. And there are a couple of social norms. They're not always spoken, but they're there anyway. And one example would be the belief that friends and family expect you to behave in a given way. So, well, you gotta kind of live up to that, right? Another one is the belief that friends and family are themselves behaving in a certain way, and therefore you want to kind of go along with them. Well, here's something. In March of 2021, the Yale program on climate change communication published a study. Fewer than half of the Americans surveyed perceived any social norms for taking action on global warming. In other words, fewer than half perceived no cues from anybody around them that it might be a good idea to take action. But what that means, as Eben said, is that's opportunity. That's opportunity for you to be setting the norms, the social norms in your smaller groups and communities, and to lead among your family and friends by taking action. So tip number 4, talk to others. Talk about what you're doing and why. But I encourage you to do so with humility and a desire to connect. Because it's really easy when you when you learn about something, you get excited and you want to do the right thing. You want to do something good. It's really easy sometimes to cross over into being self-righteous and a little bit preachy. And that might serve to divide or turn people away from what you're doing. And it's also good to keep in mind that you don't know everything about climate change. I certainly don't, despite the training I've had and the reading and watching I've done since then. Scientists are still learning more. We're all learning more. So talking while recognizing that other people have other points of view is a really good thing. So tip number 5 is recognize the power of collective action. And this was pivotal for me, and it was also hard because I'm an introvert and a private person who likes to go it alone. And I realized in July of 2020 that that wasn't going to cut it anymore. I had to, the climate crisis demands that we act. So in this picture on the left, if you think of that big red shark there is not corruption. I just use some clip art. But you think of that as climate change. If we don't do anything, if we kind of act and swim around and don't do something, we are just going to be overwhelmed. The climate change will overtake us. But when we work together, when we harness our collective power, we can do a lot more. So I suggest that you join a group in your area of focus. If you don't find one, create one. And for tip number 6, I'm going to paraphrase President John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your university can do for you, but ask what you can do for and with your university. You heard from Eben about how universities can collaborate on campus. Nancy stressed the same thing. College campuses are places highly suited to change and collective action, because you've got a lot of young people who are fervent and eager to act. You've got faculty and researchers with cutting edge knowledge, and you've got that general atmosphere of just learning. So get on board with it. You've heard about a couple of ways in which you can do that. So think about that, collaborate, think how you can be a part of what the efforts on your campus. This quote, though, also says ask. So that means adopting a spirit of inquiry and a willingness to listen to the responses. So I encourage you to take those attitudes with you when you're developing your campus action plans tomorrow, because it is really important. We need change at the institutional level as well as at the individual and household and family level. And because we need policy changes as well, my 7th tip is vote. Vote, vote, vote in every election you can. You might say it's 2021, it's not a presidential election year, what does it matter? Well, the elections taking place do matter because the people who are in office are setting policies for us. In Connecticut, where I live, we have municipal elections for mayors and town leaders. And these are the people who are going to make decisions such as whether your city buys electric vehicles for its employees to get around, whether your city will allow a wetland to flourish or permit a building project that might compromise those wetlands, or whether or not to put solar photovoltaic panels on school buildings. And that last one's a real life example. My town just about 3 weeks ago voted to approve a $2.5 million bid to put those panels on 5 school buildings. So that is where things can happen. And if you're voting, you're putting in place the people who are going to do those things. So that's it, 7 tips. And to sum it all up, work on the individual level, educating yourself, taking actions that you can make a habit. Work on the collective level with the groups you have around, groups you can create, but also work for policy changes, because these are the changes that organizations, companies, and governments at all levels can and will make if we pressure them to do so. And as you work on this, I encourage you always to have that willingness to listen, to learn, and to learn. So that's how you can become a change maker. Why should you? It's really simple. Our role depends on it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to our panelists, Suzanne and Eben and Nancy. We have about 5 minutes for questions. And again, if you have questions for our panelists or comments about their presentations, all of the attendees should use the Q&A function and we'll work to answer those. And certainly panelists, you can ask questions of each other too. So we're just waiting for some to come in.
While we're waiting, I'll just jump in and say that I think about this stuff all the time and I work on it all the time, but I've been really inspired by these two colleagues of mine and the way that they're approaching it. Even I just love the teach-in. Loyola is going to be a part of it this year. I don't think we've ever done it before. It's a terrific idea. And Suzanne, it's sort of like you're the quiet citizen that is, fighting on this and sort of showing us how every individual can make a big difference. And so I think in both ways, it's been good for me. I needed a little juicing up. I get kind of depleted sometimes. So I just thank you both. I thought that was terrific.
Well, thank you, Nancy. I think it can be easy to feel depleted when we're working on these things. And that's why, I often do. And that's why I just love to hear about what other people are doing, because that gives me the inspiration to keep going. Many of us may not, I have to admit it. I might not live long enough to see the planet get as good as I want it to be, but I have to have the faith that it will if we take action. So we need inspiration. This is not an immediate gratification thing for some of us. And so we need to keep inspiring each other.
Yes.
Well, Nancy, I want to thank you for joining us, but be sure to grab some colleagues, not just at Loyola, but in Chicago or nationally, and get them to get involved. And Suzanne, I'd love to reach out to your CRP group in your regional CRP group and maybe set up a meeting with them to talk with them about the project as well.
Perfect. We can be in touch afterward. I have your contact information. Yeah.
Okay.
We do have a few questions coming in. First, even one for you. What overlap or interaction do you see with Project Drawdown?
Drawdown is a great resource for all of the different ways that you can attack the climate problem, and they also have some great learning resources. So we actually link to a couple of their global war, their sort of curriculum that they have on our teach-in website. What's different about us is that we're actually really trying to engage people with this information, not produce it, right? So our goal is to take a lot of this great material that's out there that other people have generated and get more and more people excited about watching it, thinking about it, and working through it. So, this is a grassroots global effort to mobilize millions of people to talk about this and utilize some of these great platforms and paradigms and resources that are up on the web.
Awesome, thanks. And I'm hearing from Fairfield, there's a live question in their audience. So Julie, is that your hand up?
All right, so thank you to the panelists. I have something on a different note. So it's been 50 years now that people have been talking about climate change. There has been an alarmingly little amount actually done. So I wrote a short statement. Current appeals towards sustainability are anything but that. They are simply an attempt to postpone inevitable failure, to prop up the current industrial system by taking the load off of fossil fuel dependence. Vague goals offer no actionable plan, as the one that was put on screen that was supposed to be modeled after the UN. And also the Green New Deal is literally, there isn't a Green New Deal. They just took the name of it from the Green Party. There's been nothing written down. There is not a Green New Deal. Right, no one, vague goals offer no actionable plan. No one wants to join a futile effort, hence why I'm the only student that's in this room right now. There were early indications that industrialization had ill effects. Now it's unignorable, and yet almost all of us continue living the same way. Atomized individual efforts are nothing against the millions of tons of CO2 that have already been dumped into the atmosphere over the past century and a half. Ethical consumption is an oxymoron. No one has the ability to investigate each purchase. There are so many middlemen, marketing companies, suppliers, distributors, analytics, etc. Our economic system as we know it is what caused this crisis. Claiming it will fix it is not just foolish, it is immoral. It is giving misinformation to young people like myself or like my 2 young siblings, who will be the ones having to deal with the decisions made 40, 50 years, 40, 50, 60 years ago, never mind now. You serve to do nothing but dilute the message and delay real action. That's all I have. Thanks for giving me time.
Oops. Just a quick follow-up. What would be real action in your mind? I'm curious.
Right. So, yeah, I think so. Real action means it means that we have to just totally reevaluate the kinds of assumptions we've made. Like there's just so many, just growing up in this has forced me to question a lot of those in a way that, people in previous generations weren't forced to. And so, living your entire life with those kinds of assumptions, I think it really restricts people's imaginations on any sort of markedly different solutions. It's just like rearranging it, just forcing it, so much. The whole problem has been like we're approaching the problem of climate change in the same way that caused it, where it's fighting against the globe. Like there's these natural disasters that we have to fight against. We have to fight these fires, and that's all after the fact stuff. That's not going after the root problems of what causes it. That's just it's literally attempting to just put out the fires. That's so it as it escalates more and more intensely, those sort of events will just strain infrastructure and resources to the point that they snap. And if there's no alternatives that have been proposed and evaluated for their efficacy, that's what we have to do in a scientific approach. We have to examine why do we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and go from there. We have to really truly look at the things that we have done and what led to them. They don't just happen for no reason. It's not just these are just inherent trade-offs, because the threat is it's just too serious to I was watching a really good video last night, this behavioral economist, and he talked about, he said, if you ever wanted to, this video was from 2012, by the way, but he said, if you ever wanted to make a problem that nobody would care about, it would be climate change, right? At least it seems less in the future now because, right, like you mentioned the hurricane season last year, that caused $51 billion in damage. It tied 1997 for the most intense, and I believe 2002 was the, it's up there for the costliest. And
Julie, you're not Julie, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut you off, and because I want to give you a bit of a response to this. And I think what I would say is that your instinct is exactly right about radical, right? This is the time to get radical.
I'm gonna cut you off too, because I do
Okay.
think the response, but we're almost at time. So if you want to give just like a 1-minute response, and then I'll try to wrap us up. And then there's a couple more questions in the Q&A. So panelist Suzanne, one's directed at you, and you might, if you're able to type an answer in the chat to those folks, I want to make sure that those get heard. So Eben, please respond to.
Yeah, and the quick response is, this is absolutely time to use our imaginations, be as radical as we can, question all assumptions, but then figure out, okay, what kind of action flows from all that questioning. So, good on you for really trying to figure out sort of what is the root cause. And then the next step is, okay, I've done my analysis, kind of where do I want to put my life energy? Because we don't have a lot of time to keep questioning. We got to get to work once we've kind of done that intellectual and radical work. So definitely what we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up the tension of, yes, there are root causes, and yet we're also living in these systems. So we can't wait for the systems to be torn down to do something. So we need to think about root causes and immediate ways to address things in our present at the same time. So it's quite the tension, and dealing with those tensions by thinking deeply and critically and responding immediately is the way to go about it, but it makes it very difficult and disheartening, and also exciting, an opportunity for activism and change. So really appreciate your comments, and I'm sorry we can't get to ask the other questions on air, but I see some of our panelists typing answers, so hopefully folks who've asked some questions can see those answers. But a huge thank you again to our 3 change makers, and to all of our attendees for interacting with this panel and listening in with a critical eye and a thoughtful heart.